The Trailblazers have very quietly won 10 of their last 13 games and aren't too far from a play-in spot out west. The catalyst behind such an awesome stretch has been some absolutely suffocating defense. In those 13 games, they've had a defensive rating of 109.7, good for third in the NBA during the stretch, and leading the way has been none other than second-year player Toumani Camara. Camara starting to catch more and more eyes as he's emerged as not just a good or even great defender, but the type of guy you'd see on all defensive first teams. What is it though that makes him so difficult to score on and so valuable to the Blazers? It starts with his role. He's one of those players who's almost always going to pick up primary offensive options and make their lives as difficult as possible. The thing is, with the way teams stagger their stars and run through different guys at different times, that means Camara's often matching up with 2 or 3 different players in the same game. Against New Orleans earlier in the season, he spent a decent amount of time matched up with Brandon Ingram, which meant lots of mid-post work and limiting mid-range jumpers. And he also spent some time matched up with Zion Williamson, which brought with it a completely different approach. A little over a month ago in Milwaukee, Camara had to match up with Damian Lillard, which of course meant he had to deal with constant pick and roll and isolation play in space. But when he wasn't on Dame, he was battling with Chris Middleton in the mid-post and forcing him into some really tough looks, or he was on the block battling with Giannis in the low post and holding his own in those spots as well. By the way, when I say Camara's picking up someone, that means 94 feet with constant pressure. He's one of those players who completely disrupts the flow of offenses and makes it annoying to even bring the ball up the court. As a result, he's able to speed up a lot of offenses, forcing them to rush decisions and play with a lot more pace. That then puts him in a position to make plays. If he knows his man is about to speed things up, he can guess the driving angle and cut them off. But if he guesses wrong and his man gets around him, he's not out of the play with a unique ability to recover from behind. So, like I said, he's a nuisance. He won't give creators even an inch of room to work with regardless of where they're at on the court, and sometimes the only way to get him off the ball is with an illegal screen. The reason all of this works, from the pressure to the versatility, is because he's got a pretty ideal physical profile. At 6'7", he's got perfectly average height, and he pairs that with a near 7'1" wingspan, which allows him to play a lot bigger than his position. He's even at his moments bothering Kevin Durant, who's basically made a top 15 all-time career off of not being affected by length. Unlike a lot of lengthy wing defenders though, Camara's also got a strong, sturdy frame, so he can hold his own against bully ball creators. That really stands out whenever he's defending in the post. This time he's up against LeBron and absorbs a couple solid bumps to the chest before forcing him into a really tough fall-away jumper. Rarely ever will you see him moved off his spot or thrown off balance. But even if he is, he's got the recovery speed and length to still get a hand up. That speed is the final piece to the puzzle. It's not rare for a lengthy wing to be strong. It also isn't rare for a lengthy wing to be agile. What's rare is to check all 3 of those boxes. He's very quick laterally with elite hip mobility, which allows him to completely erase driving lanes. And once he takes away those driving lanes, not only is he a threat to make a play on the ball, he'll put himself in perfect position to draw a charge. This sort of eliminates the threat of an offensive player dropping the shoulder. On this one, you're going to see him cut off a drive from Zion, and notice how he gets his body ready to draw a charge. So instead of going through him, Zion stops his drive and turns around for a lower percentage shot. I think Camara's most impressive athletic quality though is his body control. The reason he's able to stick with shiftier guards is because he's always on balance. Even on a play like this where he falls for an up fake, most defenders would tumble into the ball handler, but somehow he shuts off all of his momentum and lands perfectly square. I can honestly say I've never seen anything like that. Like I said, he's got the agility to cut off most drives, and because of that body control, he can also decelerate to stay glued to the ball if the drive gets cut short. This is actually another big reason he's able to match up with more powerful creators. His go-to defensive tactic against guys who like to drop the shoulder is to slow his own momentum and initiate contact with his chest, then throwing them off balance instead. Now, the strategy doesn't really work against players who really know how to sell the contact, such as Shea for example, so against guys like that, it's all about preparing his body to absorb those bumps, and he does an incredible job. Luka's another one who makes it difficult, and notice how after he cuts off a driving lane, he leans back and braces his body, knowing the shoulder is coming. That allows him to hold his position and get a hand up on the step back three. Regardless of who you are, it won't be easy to score on Camara in isolation. He's just too physically capable, and his technique is just too good. But he's also pretty good at making himself skinny to sneak over the top of screens, so if ball handlers think they can lose him at the point of attack, more times than not they're sorely mistaken. This also applies away from the ball. He's capable of staying attached to movement shooters around screens, and he's got the length to make plays on the ball from behind. If that wasn't difficult enough, whenever a screener does land one hard enough to get him away from his man, there's a pretty high chance he's selling the contact for an illegal screen. Or he's just accepting the hard screen and switching, which brings me back to square one, his versatility as a man defender. Just look at this play against the Sixers. Embiid does a great job of slipping the screen to force a switch, and Camara responds by battling for position, forcing the catch all the way out near the three-point line, then playing him straight up before selling contact for an offensive foul. He unlocks so much switching within this Portland defense. Not only can he switch from guards to bigs, he can do the inverse with seemingly nobody capable of breaking him down. And so he's right at the center of the Blazers scheme, where they'll switch any actions in the middle of the floor, particularly between the wings, just completely shutting off dribble penetration. So he's one of the most valuable man defenders in the league. You don't necessarily want him matching up with fives, but when needed, he offers that 1 through 5 capability, and that alone should warrant some attention for a potential all-defensive team. Then the cherry on top is that if he's ever switched away from the action or forced to defend a lesser offensive player, he's still very effective as a helper. His activity really stands out. If you watch him on any given possession, it feels like he's always in the right spot at the right time, and he basically never stops moving or rotating to make his presence felt. As a low man, he clearly has a great understanding of where to be and when to be there. On this one, he slides down just a bit to tag a roll, and that makes Edwards think twice, only for Camara to also be in the corner to contest a three. And the reason Edwards had to think twice is because Camara does offer some legitimate rim protection at his position. Look no further than that game against the Magic less than a month ago, where he picked up this absolutely filthy rejection on Paolo in transition, only for Paolo to try dunking on him again not even 30 seconds later, with the exact same result. With that said though, when Camara's coming over to protect the rim, more times than not, he isn't looking to go vertical, he's looking to draw a charge. Just look at him on this play. As Ant looks to attack in isolation, he's positioned himself in the middle of the floor early to help on a drive. Then when McDaniels gets an opportunity to drive off the catch, he immediately beelines it to the front of the restricted area to establish position. He actually leads the NBA in charges drawn with 23, and when you also add in the fouls he draws on illegal screens or when fighting for off-ball position, you're left with a guy who forces multiple turnovers a game, even if he never touches the ball. Of course, the drawback with getting in position to help early is that you have to leave a man in the corner. Well, Camara's also great at recovering to close that space. Anytime he's forced to close out from the paint to the perimeter, he fully commits, and if he gets beat, you'll see him spin back to the paint to stay attached to a drive. And really, to make a long story short, there isn't anything Camara can't do defensively. I wouldn't say he has a singular superpower, such as Lou Dort's isolation defense or Dyson Daniels' ability to force turnovers, but when it comes to checking every box, very few wing defenders can say they're as effective as Camara. Defense isn't the question though. He's in his second season and is already an all-NBA caliber defender. The question is whether or not his offense would be able to hold up in a playoff setting and whether or not there's room for growth. As of right now, his offensive game is very weak. He'll have some moments, such as when he went for 24 points against the Thunder, or when he had back-to-back 17 and 18-point games against the Suns. But the consistent product is still that of a pretty clear liability. He offers little to no creation, he's a poor finisher at the rim, and although he's a solid passer, he rarely finds himself in a position to make plays. Basically, all of his time on offense is spent spotting up, so his development really comes down to if he can become a competent shooter. He's already improved this season up to almost 36% on over 4.5 attempts every 75 possessions, but he's still a guy that defenses choose to leave open, which does limit the spacing. One thing I really like is that he responds to this lack of defensive attention by aggressively crashing the glass, which can be a pretty big difference maker, and the Blazers have explored some stuff using him as a screener to sort of mitigate the issues, so we'll just have to wait and see what happens. As of right now, I'm not sure I'd trust him enough offensively to stay on the floor in a playoff series against a top defense. However, with some more development as a shooter, and maybe a little bit more of an off-the-catch slashing game, I do think he can get to a point where he at least treads water. Treading water offensively with all league caliber defense is a really good player who I think deserves to be talked about a lot more. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out the Hoop Venue podcast and my social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of Camara. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.